I'm seeing companies in this great reset right now in my industry make a lot of mistakes around, I saw one company say, we're not bringing our staff to the Christmas party and because of budget cuts. And I was thinking that's the worst move you can make right now, because that's the person who sees your sales team, your revenue source every single day. Now you're going to remove them. What's the energy going to be back in the office for these people who support your people every day, your sales team, your revenue source for your company? And so I see a bunch of missteps right now, and that's how I know we're in a great reset. And anytime there's a reorder, reset, all in my industry, I think in any sales industry, like a whole new group of people show up at the top because they seize that opportunity to take the reorder in their favor.
Welcome back to another episode of Just Real Quick. Excited for today. We got a special guest in the studio. Of course, as always, I got my guy Jeff Fieldstead with me today. And we got the Ryan Secrist.
The original.
The original Ryan Secrist. I grew up watching Ryan Secrist on MTV. This is a different Ryan Secrist. Every bit as important in my heart. We've been going to the gym together now for a couple of years, and he's newer to the southern Utah area, and we've gotten to know each other through just at the gym, just talking a little bit of life, a little bit of business, family, leadership, different success philosophies on the treadmill a couple of times. So excited to get to jam with you today, Ryan.
Hey, good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, we have thrown down some wisdom in 2 minutes in passing over the years. So really good to be here.
I love that, dude. I love those little moments. And sometimes, as busy as we are, those are important moments, because I don't get very many of those, really. Yeah. It's either, for me, I eat, sleep, and breathe JKR windows and my family.
Yeah.
And if I'm not doing one of those two things, I'm either at the gym or I'm sleeping.
Yeah. Well, my format's about the same, I think.
That's pretty much it.
So, yeah. I mean, that's how you know you got a great life.
Yeah.
Yep. And I enjoy every minute of it. And, we've all heard the phrase, find something that you're passionate about and you'll never work a day in your life. And my life doesn't seem like it's work or it's stressful. My cortisol levels would tell you differently just because of the pace that I go at, I think. But I freaking love what I do.
Yeah.
And I love doing this kind of stuff and getting to jam with people like you that have had their own success journey and have came from many different places. We talked about Arizona, California, and now Utah, and different colorful experiences in each one of those places that you brought with you. And in real estate, there's some interesting dynamics in real estate that I want to talk about today.
Yeah.
Because leadership is very important to us here at JKR Windows. And in the sales environment overall, I think there's a lot of people that focus on just how can I become the best salesman, and systems and processes and building teams and leadership. Unless you're involved in an environment and a culture like that, it doesn't come up a lot.
Right.
And I see this a lot in real estate. There's just a bunch of guys that are personal producers that can make great money, but is that really what you want to do with your life? Is just have to be a personal producer and grind your face off for the rest of your freaking life?
Right. Well, I think I've had that personal journey too, where you look up and you're like, I'm unfulfilled. I've had this great career, but there's got to be more than this. And I think you hit a point where you start saying there is more, and you start detaching from the volume. Or I saw somebody post something the other day that was saying, all realtors love to tell all their annual awards, which is great, right? Celebrate some success, but at the end of the day, you look up and you're like, does that matter other than attaining that goal to live your best life? And I think you do have to make that transition into more purposeful work at some point.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, about where you started and how long you've been doing this, and some of your experiences coming from that realization and some shifts that happened to help you go down this leadership path.
Yeah. So, I decided corporate America was not for me. I know that's probably as we were talking about, a familiar story for many of us. I was a project manager for ADP, the payroll company. And I made, I was thinking on my way in and kind of my intention for our meeting here today. And I was like, one way I describe connecting with you, which kind of loops back to your question, is like energy attracts like energy. So it's pretty easy to have conversations with you. So energy is important to me. And there I am in a cubicle on my headset all day on a phone with clients. And I just came out to my wife. We're 4 years married with 2 babies under the age of, I think, 2.5. And I just said, I'm already unfulfilled, even though technically I'm successful. Like I ran this societal checklist and I feel empty.
You were checking the boxes.
I was
but not your own boxes.
Dude, I was really good at checking the boxes.
Wasn't that crazy? That's how powerful outside programming can be.
Yeah. And I mean, at that time in my life, that's all I knew, right? It was like I run that program, run that checklist, and you get this outcome, but all of a sudden you look and you're like, 2 + 2 is not actually equaling 4.
Right.
So I got my real estate license in the evening, and then I quit cold turkey. I'm kind of an all-in guy. I even say this now 20 years later, and I feel this like a little bit of talk about cortisol levels. I'm like, wow, that was ballsy.
Yeah.
But literally I burned the boats, and I did cry. True story, in the shower the next morning, so my wife couldn't hear me. I was horrified at what I'd just done, because I went from 6 figures in the early 2000s to, like we were talking about, every day at 0.
Yep.
Got to get up and hustle. And I hustled, and I had immediate success, and it didn't matter who I associated with. I mean, I've always had an athlete's mindset, so I sought out the right office that felt like, the way I describe it, is like an Olympic team training for the Olympics. And so I was kind of like begging, please let me in, and they did.
Okay.
And
and you went straight into real estate.
I went straight into,
joined a team of high performers.
I did. I wasn't on a team, but the brokerage itself operated like a team structure.
So why real estate?
I grew up in a real estate family in Salt Lake City and Farmington. My grandpa owned the brokerage. My mom was, the operations person. My uncles were the agents, and I cleaned it for the office for $20 an hour once a week when I was in junior high. So I decided maybe cleaning the real estate office wasn't the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But it was a passion of mine, and that's always important to me too.
So it was
that
a
I'm in
seed
my
planted
passions.
when you were young.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was something I returned to and was familiar with, and was great. Landed the Cardinals account in Phoenix, helped a bunch of Cardinals players 2 years in.
Wow.
I grew up in a family with a lot of exposure to pro athletics, and so I was pretty comfortable in that environment, so it worked pretty well. And
That's incredible.
But then a year later, the Great Recession, and Phoenix was just joyful. The Great Recession.
They got hit pretty good down there.
Pretty good. But I learned something about myself in that era that still serves me well. When things are down, I tend to build world-class teams, surround myself with the right people, and I tend to find niches and kind of really exploit those in all the right ways. So that was a major growth period. That was a hard period. I remember going to a Panera Bread, and we had a $25 gift card, and because I'd gotten into some development, and I had no business at that point doing development, and we went to check out. I had my 2 little babies with me, and it was $11 over the $25 gift card, and my debit card declined. So that was a defining moment for me, where I was like, okay, you're either going to sink with all of this, or you're going to show up again. And 2 years ago, you burned the boats and jumped all in. So found a niche in short sales, and actually started turning around brokerages that were distressed. People were very low energy at that point.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I can create an environment that's an oasis where people can come and achieve their goals and as a brokerage level while I'm also selling, and that's what I'm surrounding myself with, then I think we can succeed. So that was my first slide into leadership in brokerage ownership. And then I went on to build many, many offices and turn around many companies. So
was it strategic planning? Like, did you plan all this out and just see an opportunity and you're very focused on that one goal? Or did it kind of just, as you reflect back on it, you're like, man, that came together really well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think right place, right time, right mindset. Okay. Like I'm always open. So I don't know that I woke up one morning and said, hey, I want to take over distressed brokerages or a brokerage that's hemorrhaging $50,000 a month and has 21 agents and 12,000 square feet and 6 of them are producing. Now, my mindset now, having done decades of that work, I would never touch that one. But back then I was like, hey, let's do this, early 30s. Right. So, I think opportunities present themselves, and I think I'm pretty good at evaluating them. So, seeing what the market opportunity is.
It's interesting because we were talking about this the other day. Is like you look back on your life and there's always these moments that you're like, I made that decision, it was a defining moment. But a lot of times when it's happening, we don't know that that's a defining moment until we responded correctly and then can look back on that moment.
That is absolutely true.
Do you feel like that when that happened? Now, now you look back on the Panera Bread incident, but at the time it seemed just miserable. Like, what am I thinking? What am I doing? But now you look back on it and go, I made the right choice.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember that Panera Bread employee looked at me. It was an older woman with compassion and understanding. She's like, just go. You know, my kids had already licked everything on their plate. And the next day I borrowed $11 from my sister and took it back in.
Wow, that's awesome.
You know, that was a defining moment. That whole market, that whole experience. And then we ended up with an office in Scottsdale that just attracted all the right people. We put all the right people in place. We attracted all the right agents. There was no negativity, even though swirling around us was some of the heaviest energy, well, certainly to date, that I had ever experienced in my life. And we ended up, I think, in 3 years that I ran that company before I moved to LA to take over other distressed brokerages. I think I was just looking at the stats the other day, 408% increase in profit in over 3 years.
Incredible.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, when you start from zero, it's easy to get, easy to go up, but that still was a global recession. You know, those numbers were against a global recession, and that was the team that we had. You know, I was a key piece of that team in assembling those people, but that was a group of people that really created something special. And we're still bonded under that experience today, even though we've all gone our separate ways. Yeah. So, defining moment for sure on many levels.
Interesting. So where do you think that mindset came from? Did you play sports when you were young? I mean, so because you're working at ADP, that was the name of the company, right?
Yeah.
ADP, you're working them, but then you quit. You're willing to take a risk and go do real estate. And then there was all these defining moments. You're willing to buy a brokerage as hemorrhaging money, building a great team. Do you think all of that came from a mindset that you built growing up, such as sports? I mean, you talked about how you had professional athletes in your family.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Brother. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that mindset is what helped you and respond the right way during these tough times? Do you think that influenced your decisions when your back's against the wall?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot of different things that contribute to the whole. I think first and foremost, I'm an underdog story. You know, didn't have a lot of money growing up, a little bit of chaos at home. Okay, a lot of chaos at home, you know. And so I've always had, you know, people tend to kind of look at me like, oh, back then, like, oh yeah, he's got a lot of energy. And but I could feel this energy of like almost like writing me off. So maybe at that phase of my life, it's proving to people that there's something in me. Then over time that matures. And, you know, I think to one of your original questions, then you hit a point that you're into meaningful work versus you're trying to prove it to other people. There's a point you stop all that. But that was a catalyst to get going at that point in my kind of development. So, and then I biked for so many years, loved road bikes and racing road bikes, pedaling. And, you know, I learned a lot of how to suffer. And I learned early on in my life that I could stay on things longer than other people. I mean, I'm that guy that is so all in if I can feel that kind of fire in my belly towards something, that spark, that I'll look at my watch and it doesn't feel like work. All of a sudden I look down, I'm like, wow, 12 hours have passed and this just felt like 5 minutes. And, you know, even in high school and extracurricular activities, friends would be like, this is miserable. We've been here for 3 hours. I'm like, we've been here 3 hours. This feels like 5 minutes. So I'm just that guy. I don't know. I think some of that's inherent and then some of that's developed. So based on my life experiences.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's a powerful mindset that I think can be developed.
Yeah.
But you watch so many people that just get so hung up and their thoughts just consume them. And there's this uncomfortability of their moments in their life, and there's this uncertainty, and there's the time that takes place and the time that's required, and they just get so caught up in getting down on the process instead of enjoying the process. Because even the times that you went through that weren't all that enjoyable, I mean, I imagined it's a very similar way that I think about it. I look back at some of the shit that I had to go through, and I'd lost my license. I was riding my bike 25 miles a day, and it would never seemed like it was that bad. It was just like what I had to do, right? I was just in the moment doing what I had to do, and I had a great attitude. Nobody had to tell me to have a great attitude. I was just doing it.
Yeah.
And when you were going through the recession, and it was the most challenging, heavy, dark times of your life, and probably that will ever happen to you, it was just like, I'm going to make a decision, and I can either wallow in this, or I can make a decision to just get up every day and keep making progress.
Right. Right. And then I started realizing, and I participate in this too, right? We're all human, but overall, I started noticing the pattern of where people, when things are hard and they complain about it, if I'm pretty extrovert, but if I can just go quiet and listen, I find patterns in these times everyone's complaining, and I know there's an opportunity in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Because when things get hard, it elevates you to whatever your next chapter is if you let it, versus I'm going to wallow in the negativity. And I have to be vigilant about, I grew up in a lot of scarcity mindset. So I always say my inner Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. He's always 3 inches from me. So I've had to be, which is now maybe my superpower, I've had to be so vigilant on protecting my mindset, because I can flip the Eeyore in 2 seconds flat. And that's just part of my reality. So I don't fight it. I just know it.
It's there.
It's there.
It's always there. And that's why I say that it can be developed, because everybody has it. Some people give into it, and some people recognize it and they're aware of it, and then they just shift. And I always refer to it like you just got to turn the volume down on the bullshit.
Something else has got to be louder.
It's going to be there.
Yeah.
But now you recognize it. You're aware that you're going to do this to yourself, and it's never going to go away. I've been going down this path a long time. It never goes away.
Never.
Well,
It
it's
just
because
gets better.
Yeah, biologically, we're hardwired to seek the easiest route. So if we can learn to do hard things and stay focused on, hey, just improving, getting better, turning down the negative thoughts or emotions, and falling in love with the process, I think that's where you really separate yourself. I've always said that, go the extra mile, because there's never any traffic there. Rarely do people go the extra mile. I mean, it's so rare. And these are the mindsets. You said something about, kindred spirits at the beginning. I think these are the mindsets that when people have had any sort of success, you can kind of just feel it at a certain level, because the way they talk about the challenging times, the way they talk about when it was hard or the struggles, it was all in their response, not to what was happening to them, but how did they respond to it, right?
Right.
And I think that's what separates success from unsuccessful, whether it was they came from a challenging family or didn't have all these, things stacked in their favor, or that they did, right? Because a lot of times I've told people that I think the worst place you can be raised in America is middle class, where things were never that good but never that bad.
Yeah.
And I would rather be raised super poor or super rich, because if you're super rich, there's all these expectations, and you just, hey, this is how I'm supposed to live, this is how I'm supposed to be, and I think it helps your mindset. And then if you're broke, it's like you have a chip on your shoulder. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to do something special in my life, right? But if you're middle class, it's just like, oh, it's not that bad. So I think that it's interesting that there are these commonalities of anybody who's achieved any sort of success, and it's always just in the mind, right? Regardless of the circumstance.
Yeah. And I think keeping your mind in a really great place. If you Google it, the energy quadrant, you have high negative, low negative, high positive, low positive, and athletes call high positive the zone, right? So I'm going in front of a client, I've got to show up in high positive, but I can't stay there because it's performance zone, right? But I have to go down to low positive. So once I had that, I'm kind of a models guy. So once I had this like quadrant kind of seared in my brain, now, especially coming out of, we were in the Bay Area during the pandemic, and 3 teenagers. And I mean, again, another teeth kicked in moment there, and growth opportunity for our family. Now I can't imagine not having the hardships that we experienced through that. But because of all of that, and then being introduced to this energy quadrant, now I'm able to go, oh, there it is. I'm flipping over to low negative. It's almost like an out-of-body experience where you're like, there it is. There's my Eeyore kicking in.
Yes.
And now I know how to pattern interrupt that and bring myself back over to low positive, which is kind of where you need to live your life. You can't stay in high positive all the time. That's a performance zone when you're in front of a client, something like this, whatever. But you have to come back down to the recovery zone, which is low positive. And so having models like that have really helped me. And empowering other people with those on my team, those have all been very critical to forward momentum.
Yeah.
That's a nugget right there, because I'm not much of a model guy, but I am always trying to pay attention to what my brain is trying to do to me. And the awareness is so important. Early on in when I was starting to mentor programs and I was starting to get involved in groups of people that were operating at a high level, these were all concepts I was hearing of for the first time.
Yeah.
And, you know, even like the music, the social media, the news,
All
the
of it.
people that I was hanging out with, even my family, just the negative, the gossiping, the TV shows, it all started to become like a light was being shined on it for the first time. And then I didn't handle it very well because it was like I was really abrasive. All of a sudden I was aware and I was like, oh, you can't say that. Like, don't fucking say that around me.
Right.
You got to turn that off. Like, I don't listen to music like that. And I didn't understand like there's a little bit more tactful way to go about it. But, you know, the other thing was my own mindset. And when I go there, I started to be able to recognize it for the first time. And it's like, holy shit, like I've been in this pattern. Now I can go back and reflect on all of these patterns that I've been in, that I was just letting myself go this place without having any of those pattern interrupts or being aware enough to be able to shift and write my goals down again or put some good music on or get into a better frame of mind so I could refocus on my goals.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just get stuck in these patterns. So that's why we see so many people that we care about. They just keep repeating the same stuff over and over. And maybe they've even heard this before, because I'm sure I did before too.
Right.
But I wasn't ready for it. It was going over my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on purpose about personal development. I've had some inclination to it. I've been drawn to it. I had a grandpa that would, sit with me and kind of teach me stuff that he was learning back in the 80s, from books that he was reading.
Incredible.
But again, I still was gifted repeat patterns in places I needed to grow until I finally would look in the mirror and go, okay, I'm ready. And boy, it never ends. There's probably, I guess I don't really want to say this out there, but I was going to say I'm excited to see what the next chapters lead to. But sometimes growth is messy. Always growth is messy. So I don't know that I want to invite that in quite yet.
Say it all the time. Growth hurts.
It hurts.
You go to the gym, and if it doesn't hurt, you almost feel like something's wrong, right? You stop getting sore. You go, I better change it up.
Right.
I better do more.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that sticks out when you say that is you start to get comfortable. We all start to get comfortable.
Always.
We've reached this new place. We just went through a bunch of growth. And it was uncomfortable. There was a bunch of uncertainty. We grew the most. And while we were going through it, it seemed like it was bullshit. And then we'd be able to look back and be like, wow. Without having gone through that, I wouldn't have grown in these areas of my life.
Right.
But then one thing that you just said was, I'm not sure if I want to put this back out into the universe yet.
because I'm in a major breakthrough period and I'm enjoying the peace right now.
Yes. But one thing that sticks
stay
out to
there.
me about successful people is you've got to come to terms with the uncomfortability of growth.
Yep.
And if you want to continue to grow, there is no rest periods.
Right.
And for me in business, we're on a war path, and the trajectory that this company's on is there's no way I can take a break. There's no lull in the activity and the action and the pressure and the uncertainty and the uncomfortability about what's next. And I love that about the position that I put myself in, because there's no comfortable zone for me right now. And maybe there will be, because it wasn't that long ago that I was telling Jeff, like, I'm ready for that now. Mm-hmm. Because I had gotten to that place where it was just kind of chill mode, and we were still growing, we were still having success, but I wasn't having the pressure that I felt like I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so very intentionally, I put a bunch of shit on my plate
Mm-hmm.
and got a bunch more going on so I could start to feel that pressure again.
Yeah. We do like the pressure. I like the pressure too. And I mean, I've just launched something new since I've been here that really is a culmination of every market that I've been in, that my career hasn't actually always made sense on paper. Because in real estate, usually say, when I got my license almost 20 years ago, my wife and I sat down and said, all right, then is Phoenix it? Because, you really need to be part of the community. And and then 5 major cities later, here I am sitting in your office in St. George, Utah.
St. George, Utah.
And now I look back in this new business endeavor that I'm launching is, I feel a lot of pressure, but it's basically me doing the same thing I've always done, but 100% on my own terms with this kind of community coaching format. But I wake up every morning and kind of feel like, it's time to innovate. It's time to bring other people through. But the pattern I'm seeing, because it's built for high achievers in my industry, the pattern that I'm seeing in my one-on-one meetings with all of them is 2023 was an incredible kind of reset market. and not just market, but for humans in general. And 2024 high achievers are saying, all right, I can see this runway starting to become clear, but I can't just succeed on my own, or all the money I've made in the past, a lot of it's fallen through their fingers. They don't have anything to show for it. Even though these are great people, but, and I've been there as well. And they're looking up saying, there's got to be something of more significance. And so now I look back at all these dots, cities, experiences and go, I can create a platform where people can come live their best lives, and I can assemble this kind of high achiever team, and we can be detached from the material things and all of that, but we can succeed with an incredible life. And it's been amazing to see that come together, but I feel pressure every day to make sure I'm delivering for these people who are putting their trust in my coaching program, right?
That's incredible.
So
That's awesome.
Anyway, it's been an amazing journey.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your coaching, your mentoring that you're doing. I know that we talked a little bit about it at the gym, but I want to be able to understand more about it, because I know a lot of our listeners are from the sales industry, and a lot of different sales industries, some real estate people, some from door to door, some from other home services sales. But let's touch a little bit on the importance of your journey and how leadership and consulting and coaching has helped you throughout the years.
Yeah.
And now how you've been able to take all those experiences that you've gone through to now offer value and be very uniquely qualified to help people go through stuff that you can offer perspective on.
Right.
And I know it's played a huge role in my life.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, there's a great author, Arthur C. Brooks. I highly encourage everybody to take a look at anything he writes. I'm absolutely taken by this guy's writing right now in his research. He's connected to Harvard. He does a lot of academic research on happiness. He has a book called From Strength to Strength. And he talks about your first half of your life is fluid intelligence, which sitting here with you guys, we've all done. We're willing to jump. We're willing to take risk. It's almost like ready, fire, aim. I don't have to have it all figured out, even though I still operate that way. It's a little more maturity around that, though. But your second half of life is crystallized intelligence, which is contribution, helping other people through what you just said. And so I think the connector for me on both of those is that in order to help other people, I've had to do the work personally. And I was having a conversation with a colleague a few years ago, and I was saying, I don't have to, if it is appropriate, I could tell my story, but, we've all in life had our teeth kicked in a few times, and maybe by our own doing, or maybe, by something somebody else has done to us that's leveled us or put us in a dark space, but, we've climbed out of it somehow. I'm kind of at a place I don't have to give all those details, but somebody can come up to me on a break after I do my 4-day sales training seminar, and they'll say, I just feel something from you. You've had a journey, right? And you feel that's that energy that we were talking about. And so I think when you look at transformational leadership, the first person that has to transform is us before we can ever spill it over in crystallized intelligence and bring other people through. But I think I'm almost 50. I think right now in my life, with all my experiences, I have a 10,000 foot view that I see the patterns. I've been at it long enough. I've been a coach for 13 of my 20 years in my industry. So how do I do it on my own terms, my own platform? Because I've owned a lot of brokerages, but those are franchise agreements and things you can and can't do. Now I don't have any of those restrictions. It's all about the other human. Yeah. And so I've done the work. I've got a lot more to learn in life. I certainly understand that. But I can create this community that people can. It's not just one-on-one coaching, but it's a community. The way I describe it, and I mentioned this earlier, it'd be like I'm training for the Olympics, and you say to me, "Hey, you're an Olympic swimmer. That's cool. Do you train with the Olympic swim team?" And I'm like, "No, I train by myself." I mean, we can't, as a high performance athlete, you would never say you're training on your own. Yeah. But salespeople, we do it all the time. We just put our head down and we're like, I'm in my own lane. But what I've discovered is if you do it with other people, kind of the core of what our conversation is. Yep. You get where you need to go a lot further under the direction of a pro coach, like an Olympic coach. And so that's where I'm at right now, is that I think, I'm moving into my season of being of contribution and helping other people through. And, in my own journey, I've had the moment of I wanted to be on the panels. I wanted the notoriety. I loved walking through the trade show at my company's convention, and everyone's like, great comments and great. Now, I love when I can help other people get on the panel and I'm standing in the back and I'm nothing satisfied. And that's been that way for a long time. Like where you actually help other people gain that and you're doing it from the wings and you don't get the notoriety.
Yeah.
There's something deeply satisfying in that for me, and has been that way for many years.
That's the
That's where I'm
epitome
at
of
now.
leadership, right?
I think so.
It's servant leadership and being able to offer an incredible amount of value and build skills in other people. And we got this concept in JKR Windows. It's called SEAL Team 6.
I already like it with that name.
SAIL Team
SAIL
6.
team, yeah.
SAIL Team 6. And essentially it's a team of people, leaders within the company that go out and go perform a mission with some intention to offer as much value as possible and leave and never need one amount of recognition or credit for it.
Spot on. Spot on.
Do it because they're pros.
Just because they're pros and they can make a big impact and they're going to go in there and do their thing and do it at a high level and then go on to the next one.
Amazing.
And that's leadership to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to take credit, and you can tell when there's a young leader and he's trying to take credit for all the cool stuff going on.
I've been that guy.
Yeah.
I think everybody who's been through the journey has been that, right? You have this ego that you want to prove, who you are, what you can do. And then after you realize that's not what it's about,
Yeah,
It's
true. Helping other people get what they want, and there's, when you're on a high performance team, there's mutual benefit. I don't worry about it, but what I need in my life always shows up as long as I'm helping other people through.
And that's the power behind set the pace, right? As a leader, it was like I was trying to figure this out. I know I always talk the story about Roger Bannister, who broke the 4-minute mile, and he wasn't actually a runner. He was like trying to prove something, and he did it just to prove his scientific studies. And then a year later, it was something like 300 people broke that 4-minute mile.
He just had to lead the way.
They just needed someone to lead the way, and he wasn't even a runner. Another guy I talk about before is this guy. I can't remember. I was telling Jefferson the story about I think it's called like Clifford Shuffle or something like that. Did you ever look it up? I can't remember. I was telling him this story. It's a true story about this guy. I think it's Australia or New Zealand, and they had this ultra marathon, and this guy he had a farm and he would chase down his sheep, and so they have this ultra marathon near his town. And he decides he's going to enter the ultra marathon, and it's all these professional athletes. These guys run 100-mile runs consistently, and he shows up in overalls and boots. True story. And everybody else has been training for this for their entire lives, and he just decides he's going to run because he always runs, chasing down his sheep when the rain comes or whatever, and starts the run and didn't know it was a 24-hour race, but he didn't know all the professional athletes stopped to sleep.
I know the story well.
Right?
Yeah.
So he just runs all the way through the night and wins the freaking race.
And everyone's going, "How did this guy win?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't know we had approved brakes.
Yes.
I thought you just run the whole thing at one time."
It's the power of someone, not letting limiting beliefs stop them. And then now everybody does it that way. And that's the power of leadership by someone who didn't let limiting beliefs stop them from doing something great, whether it's Roger Bannister running the 4-minute mile or this dude doing the Clifford Shuffle. I might have that name wrong, but it's something like that.
I can't remember his name either, but that works. We'll go with that.
That sounds really good.
But honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear that story is, where are my limiting beliefs now, right?
Exactly. Isn't that interesting?
It's like easy to look outside in going, "Oh yeah, great. And then you flip the arrows back and go, "Wait a minute. So at my level I'm showing up in life now, where are my limiting beliefs that could be my pitfalls?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's when you learn that you've started to get rid of your ego and start looking for how can you actually influence other people. Right? Because knowing what you said is like the only way I can influence other people is by going through it first, but there's still another level to get to. And we all know that the only thing that stopped us from getting to that next level is our limiting beliefs. And so once you've got to a certain level and you've started to get rid of that ego, you go, okay, this is what's stopping me. And most people, they're holding on to these past beliefs, and it hurts their feelings if you tell them the truth. But then when you get to a certain level, it's like, I need the truth. I'm trying. I have this desire to get to the next level.
Right.
And if I do that, I've got to get rid of my ego.
Well said.
100%. It's interesting how that journey goes.
Yeah, I think the one cool thing that comes with time and experience and age for some people is that you start to look inwardly. Like as soon as he started talking about that, you immediately went to, like, where's my deficiencies?
It's a great story on where I might be showing up with limiting beliefs. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, as we circle back here to leadership, it's so important in real estate and in life and in our business. And we've tried to shine a light on it and build a system around leadership. So you can go have success as a solopreneur and be a personal producer. But if you really want to make an impact and you want to live a fulfilled life, not everybody's cut out for it, but I think anybody can do it if they focus their attention there. And one of the first books I ever read on leadership was called The 5 Levels of Leadership.
John Maxwell.
John C. Maxwell.
My guy.
And
love his writings.
And it really started to put things into perspective for early on in my sales career, the direction that I wanted to go in. And for no other reason than I was having an impact on these people's lives, and I didn't like the impact that I was having because I blew a ton of people out of the water. I had these expectations that I didn't know how to communicate properly, and I didn't know how to give clear instruction and have patience and empathy and listen and understand. And I was seeing myself like destroy all these opportunities. And when I read that book, it was like, man, I've got so far to go. But if I want to do something about it, I got to get started. I got to start making progress, and it's not going to happen overnight. But throughout your journey in real estate, I'd love to hear your perspective on this because I know you've seen a ton of people do this as well, where there's a lot of work involved, and so they just put their head down and they go be a personal producer. And then I know that you're on your own personal journey and watched other people do this where they saw the opportunity. They went and created systems, processes, built a team, started developing themselves as leaders and the impact that they were able to have. And it's, personal producers going to be able to have an impact on a bunch of customers. But the impact over here in leadership, the trickle effect, all the millions of lives that you're going to be able to impact in leadership.
Yeah. Man, Maxwell, that's a whole separate podcast, his writings. But he defines leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. That's his definition. And to answer your question, I used to carry that around all the time. Going, I was like, how is that influence? Is that like brainwashing to try to get the company's goals? Or at that point in my life, that's kind of how I was processing it. And then I realized, no, like companies are made up of people, and people have goals and aspirations. And so if I understand these people and I move beyond leading with a title and I start to get in a relationship with them and understand what their goals are, then because I'm in the leadership, the Olympic coach role, then I get to help them achieve by creating the environment and also supporting them. I get to help them achieve their best life. And that's influence, right? They may not know exactly how to think or how to go about it, but as a coach or as a leader, to me, those are interchangeable. Then I have the ability to kind of pull them through as I get in a relationship with them. I'm seeing companies in this Great Reset right now in my industry make a lot of mistakes around, I saw one company say, we're not bringing our staff to the Christmas party and because of budget cuts. And I was thinking, that's the worst move you can make right now because that's the person who sees your sales team, your revenue source every single day. And now you're going to remove them. What's the energy going to be back in the office for these people who support your people every day, your sales team, your revenue source for your company, And so I see a bunch of missteps right now, and that's how I know we're in a great reset. And anytime there's a reorder, reset, in my industry, I think in any sales industry, like a whole new group of people show up at the top because they seize that opportunity to take the reorder in their favor. And so the last point to your question is, I think as I've supported a bunch of agents and I've looked at myself, I'm most successful when I stay in my strengths. And I would probably relabel strengths as your genius, your gift zone, whatever that, and they exploit that. I mean, they create systems, process, and all that around it. So I used to go to real estate conventions and I'd leave feeling like, I went in with excitement to reconnect with my peers, but I'd leave like, I got to do these other 100 things. And then for a season, part of my growth and development, I would think that's what I need to do is do all these other 100 things everybody was telling me to do.
Get better at your weaknesses.
Right. Hire out to my
Biggest
weakness.
freaking lie.
Totally. Big waste of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't even mathematically make sense anymore in my head. And so, it's like help people discover their genius, create the environment to stay in that genius, and then exploit it through the best systems and process. And, you just look at it every which you're always going to find a pathway. Social psychologists call it pathways thinking. Like you're always going to find a way through if you're in your genius. And that's tied to that magic where you and I have talked about looking down and we're like, oh my gosh, 6 hours have gone by. It felt like 10 minutes. That's how you know you're in your genius.
It's also how culture is created, because when you build systems and processes and teams around your strengths, that's what makes the culture. That's what it is.
Because back to one of our original, because your energy is
exactly.
It's all connected.
It is, and once people start figuring out these pieces to the puzzle, they start realizing like, oh, maybe it's not as difficult or as complicated as I think it is. Maybe I just have to be willing to go through the process of it being hard.
Yeah. Well, I think we're programmed with the fairy tale story that the treasure is in the far off tower with the fire breathing dragon. We got to go uphill both ways, a snowstorm and in a dark forest. And so I think we default into, I got to work harder, and the reality
in pursuit of it.
In pursuit of it. And it's almost like it's there. If you stay in your gift zone, exploit the strengths, right? Hire out the weaknesses. It almost feels counterproductive. Like it can't be this easy.
Well, and
that's coming from a place of wielding the sword and being in the forest for years and years, and my business plan being work harder.
Yeah. Well, it's, you talked about leadership as influence, which I think on the last podcast I said that exact thing. And it is influence. And if you look at, one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is Matthew 7:16, where it says you judge a man by his fruit. You spend enough time with someone's children, you know who they are.
Right.
And that's what influence is. And that is leadership, right? If you're a man leading your family and you spend time with their children, it's very clear who they are at home when nobody else is around just by how their children respond. But it's no different than a team. It's no different than the people that have allowed you to influence them in their life, their business. When you see the results of them, there the leadership is, there the culture is, there the environment is. It's very evident, right? You look at guys like, Pat Williams or these incredible coaches like John Wooden and the dynasties that they've created, or Nick Saban, how many coaches, they create these cultures and these environments and their systems where people come in and they leave champions. They produce championship after championship after championship. And you go, well, like, what is it? What separates these guys who build championship teams over and over and over? And I think it comes down to influence. Where if you take that scripture, you judge a man by his fruit. If you're judging a coach and you look at a guy like Nick Saban, it's very evident. If you're, and then it makes recruiting easier too, right? You start wanting to recruit a great team, going through. Nick Saban. He talks about his journey and how hard it was and the process of building the environments. He's been in multiple cities and multiple teams, and he's done it over and over, and how hard it was to get there. But now it's like if you want to win a college championship, well, not anymore because he's retired. But last year, if you wanted to win a college championship, your best odds were being on Nick Saban's team. And I think that's what ultimate leadership is you can build an environment, a culture like that where people say, hey, my best odds of winning are with them. Not because of them, but because of the environment, the culture around them.
Yeah.
And you can do it at a lot of different levels.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I started out, I finally had the awareness of what I wanted to focus on. It was leadership. Mm-hmm. And at that point, just early on in my sales career, my leadership development was inside of a company, working just in that position and the level of leadership that I was at. And it's not like you're going to go start a company and I'm going to work on being a leader. That is one of the levels. Mm-hmm. But right now, just for an example, in JKR Windows, we're constantly talking about leadership and how you can step up and the things that you can do right now to start acting as if that is one of your goals and you want to be a leader here. So start acting like it and start taking the steps necessary and asking the right questions and figuring out what else you can do so you can make an impact. So you can start honing in your skills and getting the repetitions in, working with people. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes. Most of the time you will early on.
Yep.
It's not going to get done right. You're not going to say it right. You're going to rub people wrong. You're not going to listen. You're going to talk over them. All the same mistakes that I made, that you made, that we've all made. But we had to go through those things in the position that we were at so we could recognize where the opportunities were, what was next, and continue to develop and see better opportunities. And we've got just incredible stories of people coming in here and just asking those questions, and they're the same. They're the same as anybody else. Mm-hmm. but they were just asking the questions and taking the steps necessary and being intentional about how they showed up every day. And some people take a slow trajectory, and some people just freaking, they go straight for it.
Yeah.
Some people have that wiring that they're just not going to stop till they figure it out. So that's great.
Yeah, and
That's
I think
incredible.
a lot of times, when people, and this is why I think when it comes to that, is sometimes people hear someone else's story and they'll start comparing themselves and stacking themselves up to that person, which I think there's some value
Human
in that.
nature.
Is although you don't know their past experiences, you don't know what set them up for that, how many challenges or struggles or sports or environment that they grew up in, where, if you can just learn from somebody's story, and rather than stacking yourself up against it, start competing with it and going, I think I could do that. So what do I need to do in a short enough amount of time to accomplish my goals in order to get to where I want to be? And I can stack myself up against this person who's had that success. Which
Great
means
mentality to have.
it's realistic.
Because I think it's toxic to compare yourself and get down on where you're at in the process in comparison to somebody who's been doing it for way longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's an irony in my industry with our company's conventions, because we have these panels, and I call them end result panels. And then when I get asked to lead the panel, I have a pre-call and I'm like, tell about that day you didn't get out of bed. Tell about that day that you didn't do
relatable,
it.
for heaven's sake.
Tell about the time you weren't so-and-so, because all we know now is the end result. Tell about that incredible journey of the grit, the tenacity, the not giving up. And really, those days you only had 10% to give. Tell us those stories. And inevitably, people come away from those panel experiences, the audience members going, I got the most out of that, because, and I think that's a company culture thing too, because then you have your people who are really what some are seeing as the end result. When they're telling their story of when they weren't that person, they're bringing other people through. That's leading from all levels of the organization. And I think early on too, when I hired a business coach in 2009, I think that was my first business coach, and she's a powerhouse. And I remember coming on to a call just to admit my dirty laundry here, right? Because we've all had our journey. And I remember coming on the owner, he's not. And, she just stopped me and said, lead up. Yeah. Help him be a leader if he's not showing up as a leader. Yeah. So you really...
What great advice.
Empowering people from all levels of the organization, I think, is key. Is key. So... Anyway, what a journey.
And I think leaders look for opportunities to become better. And those that don't become leaders wait for someone to give them permission. Yeah. But if you're a leader, you don't need permission. You're just looking for opportunities to get better, to make people around you better, to make them work together better. Yeah. We've had this conversation recently.
Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it'll continue to come up. So as we wrap up here, one of my takeaways here is, first of all, leadership. We're going to talk about leadership a lot on the Just Real Quick podcast because it's my favorite. It's the thing I get the most fulfillment out of in my life. Being able to lead my family, lead my team, and continue to push myself to get better and better and better. I encourage everybody that does listen to this, hopefully you made it to the end, and you got a bunch of golden nuggets out of this to apply to your own leadership journey. If you're in a position right now and there's not much of an opportunity for leadership, one of the things that Jeffrey just said is act as if there is. If you are a true leader, nobody's going to have give you permission to go and do leadership things and make an impact and work with people. It's either in you or it's not. And if it's not in you right now, well, maybe you need to spark something so it is. That's okay. I've been there. I think we've all been there. Before we recognized that we wanted to be leaders or that we could have an impact, we were doing a bunch of stuff that was meaningless and wasn't a whole lot of intention behind it. Now, if you're listening to this, we know that you are intentional about trying to get better. And a great place to come back to get more leadership advice at the Just Real Quick podcast. We're going to keep pumping these things out every week, talking about the 4 pillars of JKR Windows and leadership, communication, making an impact, living a fulfilled life. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the podcast. Keep coming back for more every week. And Ryan, if somebody wants to find you on Instagram, where would they go?
R.A. Secrist. I'm the original Ryan Secrist.
R.A.
Secrist. Secrist. Not like the other guy. So.
Ryan's got some great content. He's got his own coaching and mentoring program. He works primarily in the real estate space. Some of my initial coaches weren't in the replacement window industry. I just found somebody that I could relate with, that I knew that was going to make an impact. And I paid them a lot of money so I could meet with them on a weekly basis to get an outside perspective and get somebody that was willing to tell me the hard shit that nobody else is going to tell me.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the powers of having coaches and mentors in your life. Keep coming back every week for more on the Just Real Quick podcast. See you guys next time.